You know, if you're anything like us, you're probably swimming in headlines about the global economy. It's just, it's constant, right? And trying to figure out what actually matters, what the real impact might be, well, that's tough. It feels like drinking from a fire hose sometimes. So today we're going to take a deep dive. We're focusing on two really, really intertwined things, these global trade tensions and all the debate happening around the Federal Reserve's policies. Yeah, our mission basically is to sift through this pile of sources we've got, official statements, insider reports, international news, and pull out the key stuff for you. We want to help you quickly get a handle on who the main players are, what the ripple effects could look like, and frankly, why these high-level talks matter to you and your world. And the big question we're kind of wrestling with today is how might these escalating trade fights actually push the Federal Reserve to, well, rethink its whole game plan, maybe even its independence?
That's exactly it. We'll kick things off by unpacking what's happening with tariffs, trade deals, looking at official lines, but also, what people are saying behind the scenes. Then we'll shift gears over to the Federal Reserve. We'll explore the public arguments, sure, but also the private pressure that's shaping monetary policy, especially interest rates. It's really about understanding not just what's going on, but digging into the why it matters in the grand scheme of the global economy, and crucially, how these two big forces are pushing and pulling on each other.
Okay, so let's dig into that first big area then, trade tensions and those tariffs everyone's talking about. What our sources are showing us here is, well, it's an interesting mix. You've got the U.S. Commerce Secretary sounding pretty upbeat, saying they're confident of reaching a deal with the EU. Okay. But then, right alongside that confidence, there's this detail. Smaller nations will face a benchmark tariff of 10%, and those kick in August 1st. So, confidence here, but a hard deadline and a number over there. What do you make of that kind of split message?
Well, it's classic negotiation stuff, isn't it? Projecting confidence publicly, that's often about showing strength, maybe deterring the other side. But the actions, the details, like that deadline, they tell maybe a different story. What's really interesting is, while the Commerce Secretary is expressing that optimism, other sources are painting a very different picture. They're suggesting the EU is actually, actively preparing retaliation because they see the U.S. stance is hardening, not softening. And it gets even hotter. We're hearing President Trump is actually upping the pressure. Minimum tariffs potentially rising, maybe to 15%, 20%. Now, that's a big jump from that initial 10%. It signals maybe less focus on negotiating and more on pushing things right to the edge.
Yeah, 15 to 20%. Wow. It definitely sounds like we could be heading for a serious standoff, especially with August 1st getting closer. But it's not just Europe in the spotlight, right? While the EU situation feels like the main event, maybe, are these trade pressures actually causing movement elsewhere? Our sources do mention U.S. Treasury Secretary Bissett saying a Japan trade deal is still, quote, within the realm of possibility. So, talks are happening there, it seems. And here's something a bit unexpected. Insiders say Pakistan's finance minister is coming to the U.S. specifically to try and get a trade agreement. It sort of feels like these global tensions are making some countries defensive, but maybe opening doors for others.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, and if you connect those dots, it just shows how incredibly complex this whole global trade picture is. It's not just one conversation happening in isolation. It's like a web, a global network of pressures, potential deals. Every move sends ripples out everywhere. That August 1st deadline for the EU tariffs, especially with talk of higher percentages retaliation, that becomes a really critical moment. It just underlines how high the stakes are for so many economies. Countries are scrambling, trying to either lock in good terms or just, avoid getting caught in the middle of these trade fights.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's pivot then. From these trade tensions, let's turn to that other huge force shaping things, the Federal Reserve. And this is where it gets, well, really interesting, I think, because we're seeing some very direct statements, some behind-the-scenes moves that really kind of challenge how we usually think about the Fed's independence. President Trump has been incredibly outspoken, hasn't he? Saying he doesn't need lectures on firing Powell, the Fed chair, and repeating that rates should plummet to, what was it, 1%, claiming high rates are killing the housing market. I mean, this isn't just nudging. It feels like a direct public challenge to the Fed's autonomy, doesn't it?
Precisely. Yeah, it really throws that whole question of Fed independence right into the spotlight.
Right.
And it shows this delicate dance, maybe, between political pressure and the central bank's traditional autonomy.
Yeah.
Because while President Trump is making his views very, very clear in public, sources are telling us that Treasury Secretary Bissett privately actually urged Trump against ousting Powell.
So that highlights this internal tension, right? Different views, even within the administration, on something so critical. It's not just about the loud stuff. It's those crucial, sometimes conflicting conversations happening privately that really shape policy.
Right. And then you layer on top of that other influential voices, people actually within the Federal Reserve System, like Governor Waller. He didn't preview any dissent for the July meeting, apparently, but he did note the private sector underperforming expectations. And what also caught my eye was his pretty direct comment that he would accept Fed chair role if offered. So you put his economic view together with that statement. What do you think that signals about how he might lead the Fed if he ever got the chance?
That's a key signal, definitely. His willingness to step up, combined with that view on the private sector. It suggests maybe a focus on boosting economic activity, perhaps more open to lower rates, aligning somewhat with those external calls. But, and this is maybe most relevant to our trade discussion earlier, Governor Goolsbee, he stated he's slightly concerned that tariffs could boost goods inflation per latest CPI. Now, CPI, for listeners, that's the Consumer Price Index. It tracks everyday prices. So Goolsbee is saying tariffs could make things more expensive.
Right. And then he added that he expects rates are likely to fall substantially within about a year. And this is where it all connects, isn't it? You have a Fed official explicitly linking trade policy, inflation worries, and where interest rates might be headed in the future.
That is, yeah, that's a really crucial link. So, okay, we've walked through this complex picture. We've got these looming trade tariffs, potential retaliation on one side, and then on the other, these intense debates, public and private, swirling around the Fed and interest rates. What seems crystal clear is just how deeply connected these high-stakes decisions really are. Indeed. And yes, like Goolsbee mentioned, there's this real concern that tariffs could push up goods inflation. Well, that raises a big question for you, the listener, to think about. How might that potential inflation pressure coming from trade policy, how might that clash or intersect with the Fed's stated goal of seeing rates fall substantially within a year? You know, consider how these two powerful forces, government trade strategy on one hand, central bank monetary policy on the other, might end up influencing each other and ultimately influencing your economic reality. Will the Fed actually have the room to cut rates significantly if, at the same time, trade policies are pushing prices higher? That's the tension.
It really underlines why keeping tabs on both these stories and how they interact is just so important for understanding the economic climate we're all navigating. We definitely encourage you to keep following these developments, especially as that August 1st tariff deadline gets closer and as the Fed continues to chart its course through these, well, pretty choppy waters. Because at the end of the day, your financial world is being shaped by these decisions right now.